anything in life can be medicine or poison, right? And so instead of just making anger poison, how do you make it medicine in the way that you relate to it, in the way that you experience it? And ultimately, one of the things that healed me was being able to have an angergasm, like literally being able to
100%.
orgasm with the energy of my anger. It so revolutionized my relationship to this emotion.
Yes, absolutely. The first time I had a shamegasm was one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
It was like, whoa, this is shame?
Yeah.
Like, this is my shame?
Yeah.
And to me, it changed everything. Once we've worked on the charge around that past stuff, we still need to meet these emotions inside ourselves as a human being.
Yes.
And that presence piece is so incredibly key. Feeling that sense of honor in being able to feel this in the here and now, it just makes it so much more digestible, I think, in that way.
What would a small emotional liberation approach look like in that moment?
I think that's such a great question.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed.
Hi, and welcome to This Tantric Life. I'm your host, Layla Martin, and today I am joined by one of my VITA coaching certification teachers, Cory Scott. So formally, she's a licensed clinical social worker, a EMDRIA certified eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapist, say that several times fast, a licensed yoga teacher, and a VITA Sex, love, and relationship coach. As a trauma integration coach, she specializes in supporting highly successful people resolve lingering trauma patterns that have kept them stuck, helping them to integrate their experiences, harness their strength, and live into freedom and expansion beyond their wildest dreams. Her coaching draws on her extensive experience working with clients and her deep knowledge of trauma, somatics, and interpersonal neurobiology. She combines energetic and embodiment practices along with rewiring and integration tools to unwind trauma responses and to recreate a strong, stable, balanced internal ecology. In addition to her private client work, Cory also teaches part-time for VITA coaching and provides professional consultation to coaches and therapists. She lives on a 78-acre farm in the mountains of southern Appalachia with her partner of 19 years. Their two beautiful children, an old dog, a young dog, and a clouder of cats. In addition to her extensive studies, she has gained much of her integrated and embodied wisdom from her own journey of deep trauma healing and personal transformation. To learn more about her work and to connect with her, you can visit her website, www.corneliascott.com. One of the reasons I'm so excited to share this conversation with Cory today is that she has developed a very unique and powerful perspective on trauma healing that I believe can help you immensely in integrating and healing sexual trauma and past pain in your own life and body. This comes from her unique perspective of being a trained psychotherapist and then working in sexual and emotional liberation and in the fields of Tantra. So, Cory, can you share with us this take on trauma healing that you have developed through your professional work? And then I'd love as well if you can take us through a few moments of your own journey that brought you to this awareness and to this work that you do.
Yes, absolutely, Layla. I think for me, the perspective on trauma healing that has really transformed over time is an idea that stabilization, if that is our goal, right, to feel okay, to feel normal. That's often when people are coming to therapy or trauma treatment with, unresolved amounts of trauma. They have this sense of feeling out of control, right? I just want to feel normal. I just want to feel okay. And for me personally, while that was an incredibly profound part of my journey, it never really clicked for me until I realized that the journey is so much more than just okay, than just, stabilization. That truly, as we begin to uncover our trauma and work with it and engage with it and even trust it in and of itself, now that's kind of an edgy thing to say, that we begin to find our true power, our true like passions in life, and this portal to liberation. That's really kind of where I am right now in my work.
I have a few questions for you on that, and then we can keep going. So
totally.
when someone has a lot of trauma, what does it feel like in the body? First of all, because you said when someone comes in, right, and they're feeling a little bit like X, Y, and Z, what are some of those feeling states that someone can be going through?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most common is like, there's something wrong with me. I just can't get it right. I'm not good enough. All that unworthiness and shame. Yeah. That's a huge part of trauma in the attachment system, right? Shame is the innate human response to the threat of disconnection. And I think it's really, to me, that's the piece that's underlying even all the shock trauma, which might come with a feeling of terror, like I just don't know the next moment when the shoe might drop, kind of always on edge, feeling, internally chaotic.
Yeah.
Whether that's coming out in angry outbursts or panic attacks, or just feeling totally shut down and frozen. I think across the board for many trauma survivors, that underlying theme of, there's something wrong with me. I must be broken. I'm just not good enough. Why can't I get it together? We have this experience of, kind of sitting in our own nervous system, looking out at the world and comparing with all these people who seem to just get it, be able to play by the rules and play the game. And yet we're stuck. That stuck feeling is that nervous system freeze, feeling disconnected from the flow of life. And I think that just creates so much of that self-blame and shame that's often a part of it. Yeah.
I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the number one way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. So I'd love, and then we'll get into your personal story, if you could walk me through what stabilization could look like or would look like, just so people understand the kind of framework we're starting from.
Yeah.
I'll actually use some examples of my own trauma behaviors, right? So I had a lot of complex PTSD and sexual abuse from my biological father. So I intimately understand what a traumatized nervous system feels like. And a couple of the behaviors that were very notable to me, some which I've integrated and rarely show up anymore, some of which are more present in my life right now, were I used to have like pretty angry outbursts or like lashing out at people I loved, tearing into people that I cared about, like eviscerating them, because I was so angry. That one I did a ton of work on because I was like, that's not okay. And that's so destructive to people.
Yeah.
And what was really painful about that was I loved those people so much, and the more I know about myself and have gone into myself, the more I've realized like what a soft, loving, caring human I am.
Right.
And if you traumatize anyone enough, right, and they feel unsafe enough, they will resort to that level of attack or that level of anger in order to feel protected, right? So in that instance, what would stabilization look like?
Yeah, well, stabilization in that instance, I think, looks like the power of choice.
Yeah.
I can choose when I want to use my anger to set a boundary, to say no, to establish safety for myself, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we do need a fight response. Like in this world, that's a beautiful thing to have access to.
Yeah.
I always love it when my clients who've been maybe really dealing with functional freeze start to experience some of that rage and anger. It's like, the life force coming back, right? It's such a beautiful thing. And I think particularly for young women and teenage girls, they're often so shamed for their rage and anger. And it's such a healthy, of course, it's important to, anchor that, right? And again, to be able to have choice and consciousness around it. Like, ooh, is this really a threatening situation where I need to be tapping into this huge amount of fight? Or actually, this is somebody that loves me, but I'm feeling disconnected, unlovable, unsafe in some way. What is it that I need, right? What are those underlying needs? So I think being able to stay in connection with another human being, being able to stay in connection with yourself and have access to choice. I really think that's such a big part of stabilization. And just even being able to recognize, stay within one's window of tolerance. Like, ooh, I'm starting to feel angry. Can I stay in my body? Can I take a breath, right? Can I turn the volume down on this anger? Like, these are all emotional regulation skills, that basic foundation of stabilization that's often really not accessible to a lot of nervous systems. And we can carry so much shame, just like you named there, right? I used to have blackout rage episodes, where I just lost myself. I lost connection to my true nature, my sense of self, presence, and was just acting out in that anger. So, and then we begin to, even in our own trauma response, disconnect from a sense of self-trust.
Yes.
Right. That's really the heart and soul of, I think, a lot of complex PTSD is, and just PTSD even in general over time as we live with it, is the sense of like my own nervous system has become the source of that sense of threat and, almost like an enemy inside of myself.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for saying that and talking about your experience of trauma. I know for me that one of the only things in my life I can truly say that I have regret about is the places where my trauma hurt the people that I love. I know that kind of anger response was one of the most predominant in terms of hurting my friends early on when I was younger, like in my 20s, and really hurting my partners, right? Like my one wish was always like, I wish I could have loved people better. And it had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with how much I was willing to do the work to be able to heal those patterns that were making me behave that way. But I had tremendous shame. And I was like, how can I be such a spiritual person? How can I have done so much work? And still this part of me would come out. And I love saying that for everyone listening, because we're like, these two nice professional ladies who work to help people, and like both of us have had this experience of anger and rage, which is so shamed in society. Like even saying that right now, I'm like, oh, like, are people going to think I'm going to yell at them? Are people going to think like I'm, can't hold a professional space as a teacher, things like that. And, I will also say that I was able to hold a deep and clear professional space far better than I was able to hold that same space in my most intimate relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's still my learning curve to be able to inhabit the depth of clarity and love and compassion that I can hold as a teacher with the people I love the most. And that's like my lifetime's work, basically. And I will say, because I'll tease a little bit of what we're going to talk about, when I did, more traditional therapy, I found that while I was being taught to stabilize myself, right? Like notice when I'm starting to get anger, like starting to feel anger, starting to get angry, to slow everything down, to hold myself, to, take some deep breaths, all of that. Something felt missing in that journey because I would start to feel the oncoming anger and then it would almost just be like, it would like go down the slide. I'd be like, oh my God, like, here we go. Like Hyde's alive, of Jekyll and Hyde. Like, I just feel like I'm on this like anger slip and slide and I like can't get off it, And so even though I knew what to do, there was something missing in my own relationship to my energy and my nervous system where it was like, I know what to do. And somehow like, I can't seem to do it.
Yes. Oh, 100%. I think to me, that's like the gift of having done my own internal work inside myself and my personal relationships that gives me so much trust in the emotions that often feel so scary in my clients, because to me, anger is the same energy as passion. And when we can really, there's something very wrong that I always felt when I was constantly turning down the dial on my anger.
Yes.
Right? It made my life way more functional.
Yeah.
It was very necessary. And I was in huge cycles of self-sabotage, of like almost fatal eating disorder, like really a lot of what I would call retroflexive aggression, like all this unexpressed rage that I was just turning against myself constantly. Right. And so being able to feel that and start to, turn down the dial, emotionally regulate was huge. It allowed me to actually live a life that was worth living, as opposed to walking around, kind of wishing, not just kind of, like wishing that I could just leave this lifetime. And yet, when I started to actually be able to have the capacity to meet my anger with love, all of these like really important unmet needs, all of this truth just started pouring out of me. All of this passion, truly, that I knew was there, but I'd never been able to access, all of a sudden was accessible to me. I mean, it changed my career. It changed my entire life. And even just now talking about it, like I have such a deep embodied trust of the source of our pain, that it is the portal, that it does hold the keys to the deeper truths, the like truest purpose that the soul has for us on this planet. And, anger is just one. We could walk down all the emotional, slip and slides.
I'm excited to take a moment and share with you about the VITA coaching certification. This program has been around for almost 10 years, and it is my highest offering. The sexual wellness industry is forecast to be a $125 billion industry by the year 2026. Why is this? Because people are more ready than ever to express their sexuality and build deeply connected, meaningful relationships, and also, obviously, to have the most outrageous orgasms and erotic experiences of their lives. But most people are never taught how to do any of this, how to have extraordinary relationships, how to have the sex they really crave. They're looking for qualified, confident professionals to teach them. And my VITA Sex, Love, and Relationship Coaching Certification is a powerful 1-year professional certification that's helped more than 2,000 coaches make their way to becoming incredibly successful and highly paid sex, love, and relationship professionals. But this program doesn't just train you in every aspect of the coaching process so that you can build a successful online business. VITA Coaching will also walk you through the personal transformation of a lifetime, because the best coaches have done the work themselves. You'll discover so many transformative techniques like breathwork, meditation practices, self-pleasuring tools that you'll apply to your own life first, and then you'll use these same proven tools and techniques to get laser-focused results for your clients. We also hold an exclusive live embodiment retreat just for VITA coaching students and alumni every year. In this retreat, you'll experience 7 days of live teaching with the VITA teachers and I, and really refine your skills as a sex, love, and relationship coach. So if you feel called to claim your spot in this multi-billion-dollar industry and transform not only your own life, but the life of so many others around the world, you can get on the wait list now at Layla Martin VITA waitlist. I would love to walk down some of the other slip and slides. And I think I had the similar experience that I want to articulate, which is there's this small subset of people in the healing realms, in the psychotherapeutic realms, in the medical realms, and the spiritual realms that are like really interested in human liberation and wholeness and vitality and health, right? I won't take that away from existing in any profession. And for the longest time, the psychotherapeutic model, which really intersects with the medical model in the United States, was all about normalizing people so that they could function in a pretty broken capitalist system, right? Exactly. And so to me, the gift of regulating our anger, right, and learning to tone it down when our behaviors are too much, right? There's a value in that in terms of being able to hold oneself, being able to center oneself, being able to have the power of choice in oneself. And there's like this shadow in that, which I hear you alluding to, which is for, the last few hundred years in Western society, it's like, we need you to
tone it down so you don't cause any problems and you can like get your factory job done, right? Or get your 9 to 5 done. And so there is this like hidden little sneaky part of that where they're like, we're just teaching everyone to be safe. And you're like, yeah. And there's a huge sovereign expression of the power of a person inside that we haven't always honored in these models. We haven't always known how to as a society.
I think it's actually quite threatening.
Yeah.
To the status quo.
Yes.
And for me personally, I never, safety is such a like buzzword in the trauma world. It's very necessary. I think it also doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But I think the reason, at least for me personally, the reason why safety never really landed until I started to do more liberation work is because I personally think power is a precursor to safety. No, if you think about like a safe nervous system, to me, I always think of, I have this one cat that loves to just like lay on her back and like let her legs sprawl out and she's just belly up, tail like laying on the ground. That to me is like the epitome of a safe nervous system. It's open. It's in this, supine position that's just so vulnerable to the world. And how can we ask someone to experience safety in their nervous system if they have never had the experience of being able to effectively, protect themselves?
Yeah.
Have that level of power to say no. And add on top of that, maybe they carry diagnoses around their anger, even from childhood, right? That's like one of the most, there's a whole set of very common diagnoses for children that are all around like, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder. It's like your anger is pathologized. And then they grow up and it's like, oh, you're traumatized, maybe. Now we recognize that you're traumatized and you need to feel safe. But all along you've been taught that your anger is very threatening to everyone around you.
Yes.
And so how can you actually enable your nervous system to be able to, it does not make any sense to me how we go from traumatized to safe without passing through strength and power, the ability to stand on our own 2 feet and hold our own.
I definitely received that transmission culturally around anger, right? That it wasn't okay, that it was bad, that it was destructive, right? And this sense, especially as a woman, that I should never feel anger. And then I started to observe a few things when I worked with people in my workshops, in my healing spaces and, liberation practices. And number one, I saw that people experience anger as a natural expression when their boundaries are violated.
Totally.
Right? So like when you encroach on my space, I will feel angry. If you try and hurt my child, I will feel angry. If you're causing injustice to me or people I care about, I will feel angry, right? Like this protective mechanism is someone is trying to violate my boundary, right? Violate my safety. And so I will respond to that threat by expressing anger, right? It's a protective defense mechanism. And so what I also saw was that when people felt so much shame around their anger, when they started to heal their boundaries, when they started to feel powerful again, they would actually feel the suppressed rage of having had their boundaries violated. And in order to restore their boundaries, they would actually have to go through a period of feeling angry, right? So if you lived under any kind of boundary violation with a parent or a system of injustice, right? It's like, as I reclaimed my power, I'll just use the example as a woman, realizing how much the world had taken from me because I had a pussy. There was a phase in which I was enraged at everyone, right?
Totally.
And what I realized was that when my boundaries were being violated over and over again when I was young, I silenced the rage eventually and just gave up and just sort of went silent and went into freeze. So as I healed the freeze and woke up my power again, the rage came back.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't let myself feel that rage, I will just collapse back into the freeze. If I let myself experience the rage, I feel like the boundary returns and the power returns. So to me, anger and power are very connected. I would also see as I would work with women's bodies, right? Like we've both been in breathwork spaces,
that when a woman, for instance, would be just sobbing and going into collapse over and over again, her just touching her sadness over and over again never created the kind of alchemical transformation. It wasn't until we would encourage her to start kicking, to start punching, to start like reclaiming the power expression of her body, that she would then resolve this kind of collapse into sadness. That exactly as you just said, this like feeling the power of her body allowed her to move out of the trauma response into sadness over and over again, or into this collapse over and over again, or into this freeze. So anger is so complex in that if you've received a lot of unintegrated anger from anyone, it is toxic. It is painful.
Totally.
One of the reasons I was such an asshole was because people were assholes to me, right? And let me just say that the asshole is a temple to God. And I think it's actually a very sacred part of the human body. I feel a little bad misusing the word, and like you get the idea. So in that, it was like, okay, their anger was toxic, but anything in life can be medicine or poison, right? And so instead of just making anger poison, how do you make it medicine in the way that you relate to it, in the way that you experience it? And ultimately, you know, one of the things that healed me was being able to have an angergasm, like literally being able to
100%.
orgasm with the energy of my anger. It so revolutionized my relationship to this emotion.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that for me personally, when I did your program of VITA coaching, that was the biggest piece, the emotional liberation and being able to be in these sticky, icky emotions. Like the first time I had a shamegasm was one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, whoa, this is shame?
Yeah.
Like this is my shame?
Yeah.
You know, and to me, it changed everything. It changed the way that I saw my clients. It changed the way that I saw my children. It changed the way that I saw my relationship, because I mean, really in that moment, and it really was shame, because that particular emotion was so hard for me to stomach, and being able to experience the height of pleasure and this expansive awe and love and gratitude in the very experience of shame itself was so incredibly liberating. And it taught me that, yes, it's not just about feeling the feeling, right? We can go and do cathartic practices. We can, you know, have all kinds of management strategies. I really think like the crying loop that you're talking about that happens, that's such a common emotional management strategy. It's like, I often describe it to my clients like letting the steam off, you know, a pot of boiling water. It takes the pressure off, but it doesn't change the pattern at all. So it's one of the things that's so beautiful about working with another human being, or like being in a group space where there are facilitators that can catch you when you're clearly looping in your own pattern, is to kind of like, what would happen if you just slowly started to resist the urge to cry right now? I bet you $100 you start to get angry. You might get angry at me because I'm asking you to pause and hold back on the tears a little bit, but it's like the new pattern starts to emerge. The energy can flow in a new direction. And as it does, I think just the experience of newness gives us more space to be curious about it, to be able to bring more presence to it. Playfulness. These are all elements of, you know, our safety system.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think that love is the superpower, like our VITA principle number one, that bringing love to these emotions is the great alchemizer.
Yes, absolutely. So, and just for anyone listening, in angergasm, it's like I am turning myself on. I am moving towards an orgasmic state or a pleasure state. And I'm also allowing the emotion and experience of anger to flow through me.
Yes.
So as I'm moving into orgasmic state, I'm also experiencing the simultaneous flow of anger within me. And that's how you get an angergasm. So it would be the same with a shamegasm, right? I am moving into the state of orgasm and I'm experiencing shame alongside it. So I have a shamegasm. And these are practices like you're actually taught how to do that, how to relate to the emotion with love, how to bring the emotion into your body while you're feeling pleasure, and then ultimately how to orgasm with the emotion, right? Which what it does for me psychologically is it makes me not only unafraid of the experience of these emotions, but radically repatterns how I experience them. Because if I can have an orgasm with my shame, I don't have to run scared of my shame anymore.
Exactly.
Which is a hidden way of becoming present with it. Right. And so this kind of loops into, you said like one of the things that you're super passionate about is emotional liberation. I'd love to hear more about that. And one of the things that I experienced was when I was just trying to feel the moment that I started to get angry and to like contain it, I couldn't do that very effectively. Once I started ritualizing my anger, meaning like I create a safe ritual space where I can hit a pillow, throw a tantrum, cry and scream, and then I actually have angergasms. When I started to then feel my nervous system becoming angry, it was like, oh, like I can play with this, right? Like I can actually make my anger art, or I can make arrows out of my anger. That did more for my ability to not be angry with people than just trying to contain my anger.
Well, absolutely. And I would actually argue that a ritual space is a containment practice, right? It's contained. There's a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
So we are able, when we create that kind of, I mean, I almost want to call it an external container, right? It's that intentional time and space. We allow ourselves a little bit more space to explore, because it's not going to last forever. You know, it's like, I'm here, I have an intention. But the interesting thing about that, when you were sharing, is my shamegasm was not, it did not happen in the context of a ritual space. We could say that I created it for myself, but I was just on a Sunday afternoon jog by myself on my property in the middle of the woods. And it was like often when I'm jogging on the trails at my place, you'll like run into a spider web, which is such an not nice experience. But it was like that. It was like I just ran into this web of shame, and I just felt it so viscerally. And I stopped, and I just felt the trees. Like, I mean, I was in the middle of your program, so I was doing daily practices around this, but I just felt the like portal open, and my body just began to respond. I started to breathe with the shame. I started to like ground and feel the earth beneath me. I think I got down on all fours and I just surrendered to the shame.
Yeah.
I just took over. It wasn't like I was in a self-pleasure practice, although it was wildly orgasmic. I wasn't even touching myself. I'm an extremely energetic, erotic human being. And so emotion as energy comes pretty intensely and naturally to me. But it was such a profound experience. And I remember afterwards just like laying in the grass, which I'm completely allergic to. I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. But it felt so good, and smelling the earth and just feeling this sense of like wholeness and oneness that to me was only given to me through the shame itself. And then there was a choice, right? Like when I first like ran through that web and hit the shame, I noticed all of the old stories of like, what did I do wrong? Right. It wants my shame wants to attach to a story. Was it something that I said in that class that I taught? Was it, the way that I handled that client situation? Oh my goodness. Am I just completely failing my children? That's usually one place that my shame likes to go.
I've never met a mother who doesn't go there.
But I just, maybe because I had been jogging, I don't know. I just had the power of choice, probably in large part because of your transmission, to let go of those stories and to just be in my body. And it was truly life-changing.
Wow. I'm going to be super real with you. I realized that the number one thing I want in my life is to feel good. right? An amazingly happy life is built on feeling good inside of the nervous system. Those are some of the most challenging feeling states to achieve when we're being bombarded by emails and screen time and overwhelming to-do lists and career and family pressures. And to reset the nervous system to be in its natural state of pleasure and play, that's right, nature actually wanted us to feel pleasurable, playful, sensual. It takes work. Research has shown it can take up to 2 hours to switch from go mode to deep relaxation, where you want to connect and feel good. If you're like me and you don't have 2 hours at the end of the day to meditate, to do yoga, then supplements and plants can actually help your nervous system to feel the ways that you crave. If you're interested in supporting your nervous system to feel the way that you most desire to feel, then go ahead and check out our mood line to shop the entire mood product line and unlock the pleasure you crave.
I'm here to let you know about one of my favorite practices, orgasmic breathwork. So what I've done is I have made 2 different audio guides for people of all genders to train you in how to use breathwork to have more orgasmic sexual experiences. So this breathwork trains you to get out of your head, into your body, to be able to expand pleasure from being localized in your cock or your pussy or intersex genitals into the whole expanse of your body, and to be able to orgasm stronger, longer, and more powerfully. So orgasmic breathwork is one of the most powerful tools that I've ever come across, and you can learn it in a 10-minute guided audio. So you can get it totally for free by downloading it on my website. You can head over to laylamartin.com/orgasmic breathwork. That's laylamartin.com/orgasmic breathwork. You can also find the link down in the show notes. I'm so excited for you to try this practice. It's truly revolutionary and is one of the fastest ways to experience what I'm talking about throughout this podcast, which is a deeper, more potent, more transcendental sexual experience.
I'm so excited to tell you about my sexuality training for men. If you have ever wanted to take your study in Tantra and advanced sexual mastery to the next level, then this training is for you. More and more men are waking up to the fact that there's a whole next level of confidence, pleasure, and power available to them when they step away from relying on things like porn and fantasizing to drive their sexuality, and instead begin to approach both life and sex in a more primal, present, and embodied way. I know that those are the kind of men that I feel most drawn to, but releasing the stories, negativity, and stagnant energy that hold you back from becoming a truly exceptional lover requires what I call the holistic tools of sex. These are practices like breathwork, energy activation, sounding, mindfulness, and movement. So I designed this 7-week men's sexual mastery training to train you in all of these tools so you can shift your psychological and energetic approach to sex. This allows your body to last longer, allows you to have multiple orgasms without ejaculation, and to experience flow states during sex. This is all done through powerful 20-minute practices that you can do once a week or daily if you desire. So if you've wanted to train yourself in a program like this to take your sexuality to a whole new level, join me in the Men's Sexual Mastery Training at laylamartin.com/MSM. So I loved what you said at the beginning. I forgot the exact phrasing of it, but shame is something like a natural response to the threat of disconnection. Okay. Yeah. I'd love to talk about that for a minute. In terms of one of my relational trauma bodies that I've really been tracking is if I go deep enough into, like, it's almost like a sadness loop. But deep down inside, it's like I feel like my partner is mad at me for doing something. And I know that a big part of that can be my projection onto him. He's like, I might be frustrated or angry, but I'm like not mad at you in this thing. And I will feel this like overwhelming amount of shame and almost like I'm sorry. Like I'm just like so sorry that my being is like wrong somehow, that my being is unlovable, that my being did something wrong. And there's like this deep, it's like this ball of shame that's like so intense. And what I marvel at is, you know, I have this phrase that I use in the VITA program, which is like, I eat shame for breakfast. And in my own experience, I have gotten to a place where shame can actually be like a pleasant experience or like all right, like let me have a shamegasm or let me just like let it move through my body, right? So if we're talking not interrelationally, if I feel shame over my body, if I feel shame over like how I look, if I feel shame that I did something like didn't pay enough attention or whatever, I can actually let that emotion just flow through my system and be like, okay, right? And then it passes because I let it actually move through my system. I'm present with it. I hold it with love. And in a way, this allows for the energy body to digest the shame, right? So that's actually why I use the phrase I eat shame for breakfast, because this ability to digest emotions is, in my experience, a tantric concept that when you have a strong enough and open enough energy body, you can actually digest your life experience, including your emotions. So instead of walking around being like, I can't feel this, I can't feel this. No, it's not okay to feel this. It's like, oh, I can feel this. And my energy system is strong enough to handle it, to digest it, to not collapse into it or go into a huge, trying to now compensate because I don't want to feel this shame externally. I could just be with my life and be with my emotions, right? That's where I feel like the real emotional power center is. And what I'm really noticing as we're having this conversation is like, wow, in relationship to my partner, when I sink into this shame ball, I haven't gotten to the place where I can eat shame for breakfast interrelationally. I'm just like, I'm so sorry that I'm like a cosmic fuck up. And I'm like, where did Layla go? Right? Because I'm like pretty empowered in my life now. I'm pretty expressed. I'm pretty shameless. It's not that I don't have shame. Sometimes I look at myself like, when I've gotten ready for a podcast, maybe I did my makeup really fast or I didn't brush my hair enough. And I'll still have this like, oh, I'm like a Colorado girl who was like raised lazy or, I don't know how to I'm like messing up my hair as I speak about this. Like, I don't know how to look so polished and glamorous. Right. Which was like a real story I had about like New York girls growing up. Like they're all so like glamorous and put together. And I'm like this strange Midwestern kid who's like always got food spilled on me and like something's unbuttoned and like my pants are on backwards more than you would think any human could manage to put their pants or shirt on backwards. Like the number of times where people are like, is your sweater on inside out? And I'm like, sure is, right? So I would say now I've like gotten to a place where I'm 80% shameless about those things that used to just like give me so much shame. And there's still like 20% that'll crop in sometimes, but like it's pretty balanced. Relationally, oh my God, that shame ball, I feel like it like overwhelms me and it's very hard to come back. And so I'm just kind of feeling this like, okay, there's this next layer relationally. I felt that with anger as well. I stopped being angry professionally with my friends as a, matter of course. I had to really like commit to like, I will not become angry with customer service people. Like I just won't do it. Right. And for the longest time I was really good. And then I had one call with the Chase Bank and it was just, and I was like, oh, okay, we failed. We have to reset. And never like horrible. Like I'm not horrible to a customer service person. I'm just like, I lose I get a little bit like angry. You can feel that I'm angry or frustrated. Whereas like my process and my invitation has been would it be to stay in your heart, to communicate clearly, to not go into anger. And the relational anger took me years of practice and work. And I almost had to see these like operating layers of my ego, like real illusionary stories I was telling myself. Like, if you let this person get away with this, you're going to have to break up. Right. Or like, if this keeps happening, you won't love them anymore. So it's like I was going into existential threat and justifying my anger. I had to walk myself back from that. Right now, I'm really seeing like, I feel that this relational shame ball that I can go into, I want to learn to meet it in a different way. And actually the thing that's coming to me is like, what would it look like in those relational exchanges to actually pause and ritualize my shame right then, right? To pause and literally maybe even have a shamegasm in that moment and change the interrelational experience of my own shame.
Yeah, I think it is so amazing to be able to me being able to have that choice of like, ooh, right now I feel so much shame. And I also can really relate to what you're talking about in my primary partnership, right? Of this huge threat of disconnection that brings this massive ball of shame that for me often feels like I can't talk. Like the more that I speak, the more disconnection is going to happen. That's sort of my narrative. It's like, just shut the F up, Cory. Like, and it's so toxic. And so being able to like meet that shame as an energy, have a ritual is beautiful. And I also think that there's some really important information that's probably underneath that. Like we don't do this work and then we no longer experience anger. We no longer experience shame, right? They're such important. I like to think of all emotions as like messengers from our soul.
Yeah.
And so to me, when I experience something like a shame spiral like that in my partnership, it's really helpful for me to ask myself, where am I experiencing disconnection? Like what are the parts of me maybe that are coming up right now that don't feel safe and seen by my partner, that don't feel like even though I've been with him for 2 decades, like they don't have a place here. They don't feel like they have a place here.
Yeah.
And so like that also, like that piece to me needs to be there to really like, particularly in an intimate partnership where you are like cultivating intimate and, self-discovery connection, right? It's such a ripe, like petri dish for shame to start to pop out when we get intimate. The shame starts to come out. And if we don't want to feel it, then it's way easier to feel angry at my partner. It's much easier to maybe even feel anxiety and just kind of go shut down and go inward. But to be willing to feel the shame, I think, that's like always my first step is like, thank you. Thank you to me for being willing to feel it. Thank you to my soul for being willing to like offer me this opportunity. And then, yeah, like, can I bring pleasure and love to this? But can I also listen, for where are these new places of disconnection that are just like popping up so that we can create more intimacy, more connection.
All right. So let's pause right there and actually just hear from you. What is the journey that you went on that caused you to understand that trauma healing was so important? And then that there's this next level of trauma healing that we're not always yet talking about.
Sure. Well, my journey is such a blended journey. It really started as my personal journey. When I was about 20 years old, I was really deep in my trauma response, actively suicidal. So I started my healing journey at that point. I mean, I just hit rock bottom. I'd been in therapy, but, and I'd actually been practicing yoga and meditation, but really coming at all of that from a very anorexic standpoint. I wanted to control myself because I felt so out of control from all the trauma. So as I began to recognize, just over like falling on my face over and over again, like, okay, this control method is really not working. It's actually making me really, really sick. I started to simultaneously study human psychology and social work particularly, and became very interested in using my mind, which was such a source of suffering for me, to try to understand and make sense of what was going on with me. So my career path and my personal journey have always been really entwined in that way. And from the very beginning, I was really interested in child development and particularly attachment. And later on, I realized now that I was really trying to tell the story of attachment trauma. Although, when I was in graduate school in the early 2000s, like that wasn't at least a part of what I was really, we were talking about attachment styles and, how to create secure attachment, but there wasn't a lot in the literature about developmental trauma at that point. But it was really resonating for me, like just being with babies and moms, something was really waking up inside of me. And so I started to come to my own personal practice and healing work, continuing to engage with yoga and meditation and breath work. The body has always been such an important portal for me. I think on the one hand, because I'm an eating disorder survivor and, blessed with recovery. So the body has been such a source of pain and shame. and honestly terror. And then at the same time, like I knew that I needed to heal with my body. So I'm trying to answer your question here. As I began to study and then work with people more and more, it just became so clear in my own system that we were all dealing with trauma. That at the end of the day, all of my psychopathology, study was maybe really just about trauma.
Yeah.
And that really came to light within my own system. And that there was something for me, there was something intangible, like all the shock trauma. I could tell horrendous stories, of sexual assault and different experiences that I had, but it never actually touched, those stories never touched the pain that I carried.
Yeah.
They couldn't quite, it was like I was going to therapy and trying to come up with like, what are the stories for my therapist that can help them to understand how much existential shame, rage, terror, just like fear of complete fragmentation, really big pieces of pain I was carrying. And, I would tell these stories and then I would be met with often, oh, but, the like positive reframe. And it was like just doing exactly the opposite of what I needed, which was validation and connection in those moments. And somebody's looking at me and feeling the story, but looking at the pain that was underneath it, saying, I see you. This pain is valid. You carry pain from your lifetime. Yes. And these stories, but also so much more.
Yeah.
Those early years and even your inherited trauma, right? There's such a bigger story that we can start to understand when we open our ears and our hearts and our minds to the story that the body is really telling us. That's so much more than just what happened, who said what. So all of that really led me into, okay, we have to be able to work with the body and we need to be able to tap into that pain that doesn't necessarily make sense, that doesn't have, the story that's easy to kind of tell from beginning, middle, and end. To touch on that.
Something I've really felt with most humans is like they have a hard time progressing to true healing until someone hears how much pain they're in and is just like, I see you.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to be in that much pain. And given your infinite intelligence, everything you've been through this lifetime, past lifetimes, who even knows the fracture of our tribal systems, the brokenness of our way of being with the earth, with our families, with our bodies, spiritual, dissociation and disconnection and really hard teachings that make us kind of hate ourselves. Like, of course you're in that much pain.
Right.
Like I feel you in that.
Yes.
And I think sometimes people can go their whole lives and never get that. It's interesting to me as I find sometimes that one piece is an obstructing factor to them being able to then go, okay, now I want to start digesting it and move forward. And like sometimes I see that with these like, oh, let's change the belief system. Like, let's look at it positively. Let's find the silver lining. What's the gift in it? It's like, if that comes before someone is just fully seen in the depth of their pain, I find that actually like it doesn't land.
Right.
It's that I see you first, the being felt in it exactly as you discussed. So from your psychotherapy training, right? And you do at our retreats, this great service, right? Of really inviting people back into sovereignty if they are getting stuck in a trauma spiral, right? You're excellent at taking people who have gotten very fragmented or very deep in some sort of spiral, mental, emotional, where they're no longer able to be in their sovereignty. You're so good at bringing them out of that and back into their power. It's one of your superpowers. And something that's so interesting that you've said is like, all of that training took me so far. And then I started to see something else when I started to engage in more of the tantric practices, more of the somatic practices, more of the emotional liberation techniques. What is it that you saw and learned that showed you like, wow, something might be missing? And when people get this piece, they actually start to heal even more deeply.
I think it's interesting what you just said about needing to be seen in our pain.
Yeah.
And to me, emotional liberation is about being able to see oneself in the pain. And when we say see, we really mean like I can feel you, right? It's the feeling with another person. And I think it's such an important experience, for those who are listening to this, when you're looking for a trauma, therapist or space holder to heal with, it's the most important component is that you feel felt by the person that's holding that space. And then in turn, what happens is we begin to be able to feel that and relate to that within ourselves, to see and feel our own pain and to be able to, yes, bring safety to it. But to me, safety is also like honor. True safety is like full acceptance, allowing this to be here. That is when we have the space to bring safety to our rage, to our shame, to both see it and allow it fully. And that's a hard thing to do. It's easy to talk about. It's way different to actually experience it. It's why I think it's so helpful to not try to do the trauma healing alone, because we have a million of those emotional management strategies to not feel it, right? How can I let off just enough steam that I can kind of shove this back into the closet, so to speak? And so that, when we're on retreat with participants, that's really all I'm doing. I mean, all I'm doing. It's a big job, but it's feeling the pain with someone and bringing love and safety and a hell yes, like you can handle this. This is yours. This is your birthright. And that for me was the piece that I think really shifted me out of, the stabilization medical model of like, okay, where are the symptoms? How can we decrease, the level of, dysfunction here so that we can create a more stabilized system? It was like, I think that these symptoms might be goddess consciousness itself, and not to say that it doesn't need stabilization, but it really changes the way that we relate to those emotions that feel so painful when we start to recognize that they are our power, they are our life force, that there's so much truth here. And maybe even they're showing up just at the right time, when I have just enough capacity to be able to handle it, just enough support. I think that's really, I'll just say this one last thing, but I think that that's also why in intimate relationship, we do feel the deepest levels of shame, of unsafety, of dysregulation, because there is that container that's safe enough for these old, deep places of vulnerability and pain to start to surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way that I see what you're discussing is like this containment, right? It's like there's times when I start going into a story, start feeling overwhelming emotions, and it's like, all right, Layla, pack it in.
Yeah.
like take a few deep breaths, calm yourself down, go for a little walk, get yourself out of it, because it's time to work. It's time to show up for the people you love. It's time to take a flight somewhere. Like you don't have time for some sort of emotional deep dive right now. So holding it down in myself sometimes of like, let's not go there. Let's relax our nervous system. Let's ground, and let's just go into a sense of safety, a sense of calm, a safety of presence, right? That's such a beautiful skill. Everyone needs that skill.
Absolutely.
And if that's the only skill you have, it can engender a kind of fragility, because if you're not able to contain, right? Or if all you can do is contain, feeling yourself still feels terrifying, right? Feeling your own anger, what you've been alluding to, feeling your own rage, feeling your own fear, feeling your own vastness of love, right? Feeling your own erotic charge can still feel so scary if all you're being taught is contain, 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 right? If all you're being taught is, find a sense of safety that's just about comfort, right?
Yeah.
And I think what you're endeavoring to teach people and a lot of the work we do together is what does it look like to be able to be with all of yourself and feel safe, to be able to be with the vastness of your shame or your anger or your fear or your turn on or your love, and to feel present and loving and expressed and safe in all that you are. And I think what we're longing for is someone to meet us there interrelationally so that we can start to map that territory in ourselves, right? That's what I ultimately want for people, is not to have to control their inner reality, but to be able to meet their inner reality. And part of the empowerment of that is the only part of us, in my experience, that can truly meet ourselves at that level of love is our consciousness. It is our presence. So when you're being taught that, you're being taught not to control your reality from your mind, which can be useful at times, but to literally learn to be with yourself and meet yourself from the expansive presence that's within all of us. Once I found that piece, I was like, oh, I'm not afraid to step into a ceremony, a ritual, a lovemaking session, falling in love, all of that, a deep relationship, because I know that I can meet myself, and I'm constantly finding the edges where I still can't meet myself or where it overwhelms me or where I do get terrified, but I actually trust that I can find my way back to presence with myself. And to me, when you say I feel like emotional liberation is such a huge key, right? That is this whole next step for people to be like, oh, I can actually be good with all of myself.
Yes. Yes. And I think the presence piece is so important. And actually quite complex.
Yeah.
Because when we're in those big emotional triggers, we're often so much experiencing the patterns from the past.
Yeah.
And then often, catastrophizing the imagined future.
Yeah.
And we're not in the present. And that then just feeling is what leads to more dysregulation, and we cause harm to ourselves or others.
Yeah.
But when we can actually be present, which I think containment, when I was first studying EMDR therapy, there's such a beautiful containment process that I think every single kindergartner, across the planet, should learn.
Yeah.
And I teach it in the trauma workshops that I teach for VITA coaching, it's so simple. It's just an imaginary container. And you notice what doesn't feel good and what are the memories, right? The thoughts, the images that come to mind with that. And can you place it in the container and put the lid on top, right? It's so simple, and it's almost like, oh, come on. But I think it's important to really differentiate that practice is very different than repression. We're not just stuffing it down. We're actually acknowledging, ooh, there's painful stuff from the past, but that past is not happening right now.
Yeah.
And for the nervous system, we don't know, our internal biology does not necessarily know the difference between imagined and real threat, right? Neuroscience has really shown that is true. It's why visualization in preparing for a performance is so helpful, because for the nervous system, we're going over those patterns and it feels like we're doing the thing. It's the same as when we go into the past and we rehash that. It feels like it's happening right now for my body, even though a part of my psyche might know that it's not. Yeah. And so being able to externalize that experience, put it away, and then maybe meet the emotion in the now.
Yeah.
That's left over.
Yeah.
And having, again, that choice, that's that first piece of stabilization, right? I'm going to choose to put this away. I'm not going to feel this right now.
Yeah.
I want to have a nice breakfast with my partner. I don't actually want to process all my existential shame with him in this moment.
Totally.
Right?
Yes.
Just want to enjoy this grapefruit and have a good laugh. What a great empowerment tool to be able to put it away.
Yes.
But then it still needs to maybe be dealt with, And so when is a good time when we can both say, okay, let's pick a time and a place to actually work on this,
get the box back out.
Let's get that box out and let's start to make love to it, and maybe the memories aren't even necessary so much. I think that's really where therapy and specific trauma, focused treatments can be so helpful.
Yeah.
But once we've worked on the charge around that past stuff, we still need to meet these emotions inside ourselves as a human being.
Yes.
And that presence piece is so incredibly key. Because all of a sudden it becomes more manageable when it's just the here and now.
Yes.
And I don't have to actually like process generations of trauma. Like I can, but I could also like invoke my ancestors to hold space for me. And I could be like, feeling that sense of honor in being able to feel this in the here and now. It just makes it so much more digestible, I think, in that way.
Yes. So a containment practice would be, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm doing something, and like a trigger comes up, a feeling of rage, a feeling of wanting to control something, a feeling of sadness, feeling of shame. I'm like, okay, right now, not the time to feel this, right? Like I need to be doing something else. You could be coaching, right? You could be holding space for a client. I might need to go to work. I might be like, look, I don't need to do this right now. Like you're saying, I'm having breakfast with my partner. I'd rather enjoy my grapefruit, right? Than be like dragged back to the past. So I feel there's a box of some sort, right? Mine is like gold, has like gold sides and like clear glass. And I'm just going to put it in there. I'm going to put the lid on it and I'm going to go back to what I was doing, right? So that would be a form of containment. And as we said, if you box everything away for too long and you never open it back up, it's probably going to like start coming back in ways that like haunt you, right? So the box technique is good for some parts of life where you want to just keep going uninterrupted. What would let's say in the anger comes up, the trigger comes up, the shame comes up, I'm eating my grapefruit. What would a small emotional liberation approach look like in that moment?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. So for me personally, in that situation, I'm going to feel my feet on the ground and my seat in the chair. Like, especially with anger, I think it's so important to ground that energy. It's so fiery, and I am generally speaking a fiery human being. So it's important for me to connect to the ground and to take some breath with it, right? To come back into my body, because even though I've done so much work with emotion, like these are always the foundational first steps is breath, body, ground. I can't really liberate anything if I'm not in my body. And then I might just feel it for a moment. Let myself maybe sound the sensation of anger. And it doesn't need to be, it could just be a hum on exhale, but it's like feeling like a low growl through my chest. And then I'm going to like take a moment to check in with myself. Does it feel okay to be here? Like you said earlier, right? Anger is that emotion of like letting me know that there's a boundary here. There's a boundary breach. There's some significant unmet need, typically like around the amount of space. So do I need to back up a little bit? Even I'll let my chair just move back away from the table for a moment. And as I am with that and I'm listening to it, I'm really listening to what are these unmet needs? Like how, to me, my practice, if it's anger, I'm looking for the passion. What is it that I really want? What am I lit up about in this that's getting missed and coming out as anger? If it's shame that I experience in that moment, this is a game that I play. To me, shame is the same energy as actually healthy, shining pride. Like when my shame is liberated, I feel like the kind of innocent pride that you see in toddlers. There's no ego there, right? It's like I can unload all of this food from my high chair onto the floor. Look at what my hands can do, That kind of effusive sense of like shining pride. So I hold that actually in my mind. Like this is the potential of this energy, right? If it's fear, then to me, it's like, ooh, there's something new. There's adventure. There's like in the attachment literature, we often call it seeking. It's that curiosity. And again, toddlers are such a great example of this. If they're afraid, they're like clinging to their caregiver, right? When that energy is liberated, they're like wandering out into the street, right? They're just seeking new adventure. So to me, I hold that, in my conscious awareness is that there is a potential for the full spectrum of this emotion.
Mm.
And can I bring love and safety?
Mm.
So maybe I do give voice to it, to my partner. Maybe I start to talk about it. Maybe I just allow myself to feel it and enjoy it and let it be just for me. And these are all, different ways that we can start to meet it. But that presencing piece and getting out of it really is a discipline to not get stuck on, well, he's chewing with his mouth open, and it's driving me nuts. Well, like I can address that in the moment, but there's so much energy that comes up in that experience that's so rich that could create, a spontaneous, like fun morning sex scene, right? Like there's so much potential. And yet we tend to stay kind of rigidly clamped down, either holding our judgments or our stories, like, right in our face, or we're just like, okay, I got to put that away.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, can I feel it and can I trust it? To me, that those are like the two components of emotional liberation is, can I trust the wisdom of this emotion and then start to have choice of how I can play with it with myself and maybe with another person.
And I think the invitation of that is to learn to play with your emotional experiences, is to learn to play with life. And to me, that is the ultimate sign of having integrated or healed our trauma, is that we're able to play where before we got stuck or angry
100%.
or sad or frozen.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. And I feel like I play in my work now more than, it's such a playful place. It's funny that I call it work, right? But it is. It's the embodiment of play. Like that is how I approach trauma healing and liberation is the space of play. And then our mind becomes this actually incredible tool that we can use to play pretend with that, Because I think in the somatic world, often the mind gets like a bad rep. Like we're supposed to not be in story or not, stay out of the mind. And it's like the imagination is one of the pieces that we get to reclaim in this process, and to be able to envision just, around the breakfast table there, like what might be possible if I meet this moment of petty anger with a little bit more curiosity and embodiment and pleasure and openness. So much magic can come.
Absolutely. Yes. So where can people find you and work with you?
My website is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me, corneliascott.com. And right now I'm really fully booked, but I'm happy for people to join my mailing list. I'm happy to be in touch. I love hearing from people who are interested in my work. I'll open my waiting list at some point soon. So if you really feel a burning desire, feel free to reach out. But yeah, those are probably the best places. I'm a working mom. I love my clients. And so for this season in my life, like I'm not active on social media. I don't have big platforms. I'm really just loving my life and loving my clients and loving the work that we're getting to do. And that's really where I tend to like kind of nest myself, at least in this season. So it's a narrow path to get to me, but I also love to hear from people.
And another way that people can work with you is by joining VITA Coaching, because you are one of our senior teachers. And would you take a moment just to share with people what is so amazing about the program? As someone with a full wait list and roster of clients, why are you part of our program? Why do you teach in it?
I love the VITA Coaching program so much, Layla. It's so good. What I love the most about it is the way that you can use VITA Coaching in so many different capacities, right? We have alumni who are business coaches, who are teachers, who are attorneys. Like, and yet the work itself, I hear stories on the daily of how that program has influenced their work, their life, their relationships. And to me, that also is the piece of VITA Coaching that makes it so profound is I think the focus on relationship, and gaining coaching skills is something that I think every working professional could really use, because almost all of our work, even if we work totally on our own, we still have a relationship with ourselves
Yeah.
and a relationship with our own work that we need to be able to be, curious about and in conscious partnership with. And to me, that's such a huge part of the program is how are we relating to ourselves? How are we relating to the moment to moment impulses that are coming up, the desires that we have, the people in our life, the people from our past. And then what do we do with that? How are we creating this new path forward? I also think that VITA coaching, the way that you've created it, where you get to do this deep internal dive inside your own system and really explore your sexuality as a pathway to liberation. This is massive for so many people. And what a beautiful, unique opportunity to get such a deep dive, it's laid out in such a beautiful, clear path through all of those 12 modules. And then at the end of that, get to move into really learning how to hold space for others, experiencing other people holding space for oneself. There's so much learning that I personally, even though I had been a psychotherapist, I'd been a certified EMDR therapist at that point, like I had so many tools in my toolbox. And when I signed up for VITA coaching, it was completely on a whim. I did not have a good, attitude toward the coaching industry in general. I never thought I would be a coach. It was purely for my own Tantra studies and curiosity. I really thought I would just do trimester 1 and then quit.
We got you.
And then I was like, oh shit, trimester 1 was mind blowing. I guess I'll just show up to trimester 2. And then I completely fell in love with the coaching methodology. And I started to just like sprinkle it into my therapy practice almost immediately, which I would tell most of my students, tisk, don't do that. But I did. And I had clients that I had worked with for many years who started to say things like, I had no idea that my body could do that.
Wow.
I remember after a session, a client of mine laid down in the grass, like in the parking lot, like a little green space. And I was like, oh dear. And in their next session, it was like, I've never experienced anything like that. I felt like I had a psychedelic experience and it was just my own body.
Yeah.
The freedom to be able to like walk into a therapy session when you've had incredible amounts of anxiety for your entire life and felt so unsafe, to feel the safety of being able to just like lay down in the grass and look at the clouds before you drive home because you're in such an ecstatic state. It's like such a precious gift,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so I started to really, it was my clients and my own lived experience that just said to me, you have to continue to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's what I want for everyone else. I want other people with other backgrounds, right? I really think I would like to stress that I think VITA coaching is for more than just people who want to be coaches or who are psychotherapists. I really think it is for the leaders of our world to know how to hear another human being, to know how to hear themselves and create space for the body, for our sexual being to come to life, which is our source of creativity, of inspiration. What could teams be able to do with a leader that can hold space like that?
Thank you, Cory. So wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for all of the work you do. Thank you for being such a pillar of VITA coaching. I love you.
Oh, I love you too, Layla. It's such a blessing to be here. Your work is so important in the world, and I'm just so grateful to be able to be along for the ride.
Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.